The big book of Where's Osama not even opened when the National Security Advisor Condoleezza Rice met with Britain's chief foreign policy advisor only 6 months after the September 11th attacks. What they discussed instead, regime change in Iraq, and evidently not for the first time either. That just one of the revelations in what has now turned into a series of so-called Downing Street Memos. 8 more documents from 2002 leaked to the Associated Press over the weekend, further suggesting that President Bush and British Prime Minister Tony Blair were determined to remove Saddam Hussein from power within weeks or at the latest months after 9/11, despite a near total absence of even incorrect evidence that might have linked him to the attacks on America. And despite concerns within the British government that the Bush administration lacked a clear and compelling military reason to invade. One memo to the British foreign minister from his political director reading, quote, U.S. scrambling to establish a link between Iraq and al-Qaeda is so far, frankly, unconvincing. For Iraq, regime change does not stack up. It sounds like a grudge between Bush and Saddam. Another memo addressed to Prime Minister Blair himself, showing there were also concerns that little thought was being given to the invasion's aftermath. A post-war occupation of Iraq, it read, could lead to a protracted and costly nation-building exercise. As already made clear, the U.S. military plans are virtually silent on this point. Joining me now from Washington, Richard Wolff, Newsweek magazine's senior White House correspondent. Good evening again, Richard.
Great to be with you again.
Well, now that we have read basically everything in the British cabinet secret files except the reasons that Prime Minister Blair and his wife had their late-life baby, is this getting any closer to being the supposed smoking gun about President Bush and Iraq that Mr. Bush's critics were claiming when the first of these memos leaked?
Well, it does depend on what you call a smoking gun. If you remember originally, a smoking gun was supposed to be a mushroom cloud, and we're certainly not at that stage now where a smoking gun is out there that proves conclusively that, for instance, what we're really talking about, that President Bush and Tony Blair were lying, that they knew this information, the case for war was wrong. What these memos really show is that the decision was made to go to war before there was a case. In other words, they were cherry-picking for the argument about war. And what it also shows most critically now is that there was really totally inadequate planning for the post-war period. You know, put together, you don't have a smoking gun that says either man lied, but what you do have is a real failure of leadership, a failure to ask the right questions, to do adequate planning, and really a failure to make the case to the general public. That's why you hear President Bush now making, I think it's the 8th or 9th version of why the country needs to be committed to Iraq.
Also regarding the timeline, the first words, at least that we've seen in that March 14th, 2002 note, seems particularly relevant. The British Foreign Policy Advisor, Mr. Manning, writing of his dinner with then NSA Condoleezza Rice, and it begins, Condi's enthusiasm for regime change is undimmed. I mean, that implies, doesn't it, that the U.S. was cherry-picking, shopping an invasion of Iraq, not just in March 2002, but if she had undimmed enthusiasm, then it implies she was shopping, cherry-picking appreciably earlier than March of 2002.
Right. Absolutely. What we're seeing here are conversations rise to the surface. So they were going on before they were committed to paper. And yeah, absolutely. The crucial question is, why did they turn away? Why did the Bush administration turn away from al-Qaeda and go to Iraq? And what we have here is a timeline that doesn't match up with their public statements at all. At this period and through the summer of '02, the public position was there were no war plans on the desk of the president.
You know both of these political systems. I assume that you are convinced, as others are, that the memos are authentic and the conversations are presumably well documented. But they could not have gotten great distribution even in England. Whoever is leaking them, are they being leaked to undermine Prime Minister Blair in a very material and immediate sense, to force him to move up the day that he's going to quit and his number 2 man, the Chancellor Gordon Brown, becomes the Prime Minister? Is that the motive behind this, do you suppose?
Well, could be. In Westminster, where all of London politics plays out, is a notoriously secretive place. cloak and dagger politics is just part and parcel of it. I think the initial memo was certainly designed to disrupt Tony Blair and interfere with his re-election. What you're seeing now, I think, you could have multiple leakers here. People who want to make the case for a smoother exit from Iraq for British troops. Some British generals are floating the need for British troops to go from Iraq to Afghanistan. I think there are probably multiple players here, everyone looking out for themselves. Gordon Brown wouldn't have his hands on these materials, but Tony Blair may well do, and some of his officials certainly may be trying to protect themselves.
And the move to these latest memos going to the Associated Press, which guarantees it international distribution immediately, particularly to the United States, suggests that there is some intent to make this White House look pretty bad.
Well, there have been really a lot of tensions all the way through, and some of these memos get to that, but there are tensions on the ground right now, as there have been throughout the whole occupation, about the military tactics, the political future. I'm afraid there are a lot of British officials in the military and political leaders who feel that they have not been treated with adequate respect, and they haven't got the punching power that they deserve as such loyal members of the coalition. So there could be a lot of disgruntled people out there who want to leak just for that purpose.
An extraordinary story, and maybe we haven't seen the last of the documents. Richard Wolff, Newsweek's senior White House correspondent, thanks especially for your time tonight, sir.
Thank you.